Mercadante is going to talk tonight on analyzing and presenting reproductive records for clients. Thank you, Dr. Mercadante.
All right, thank you, Lee. I appreciate the introduction. Really too bad that we had to cut Dr. Anderson a little bit short, but you know, you guys can keep asking questions in Q&A, and he can answer. He can type an answer that's visible for everyone. So, you know, to limit the impact of having him lose connection. But you know, at this year, as we were thinking about the program and how to, you know, pick topics and things that would be relevant and important, you know, not only for producers but for veterinarians. And one of the things that we discussed as a committee when we were, you know, organizing ARSBC was the need to really get more veterinarians involved and highlight the importance that the veterinarian has on any reproductive management program in the beef operation. So one of the things that is really important is not only providing the service, but providing guidance to clients, and we do that providing solutions, for example, and we do that hopefully based on information that's recorded through data collection and analysis. So my goal tonight is just to share some thoughts on things that data to collect to clients and how to present that to them, and things I really think are important to help understand why perhaps we have a problem on a reproductive management program, or why we have unsuccessful AI and fixed time AI programs, for example, on a client. So we all understand this, right? Like, you know, if you're in the beef cow calf production, you know, this is your goal, right? Is to produce that calf every year, because we're in the business of selling pounds of calf, right? In the cow calf industry. And we need to make sure that calf is healthy and it's heavy. You know, Dr. Spear early on mentioned this, you know, the calf is not alive, he's not going to perform, right? So it's really important. And a key component to achieving this goal is reproductive efficiency. Now, people might define reproductive efficiency a little bit different than myself, but this is how I think about reproductive efficiency, right? Is to optimize pregnancy as early as possible in the breeding season, and also to select and develop replacement heifers that have high fertility. And we're going to do all that at the lowest cost possible. And I used to say maximize pregnancy. And I learned that, you know, maximizing might not be the term to use, because you can spend a lot of money trying to maximize something and not have an economic return, you know, on the investment that you made. So you really want to optimize, right? You want to make things that to ensure that things are economically sound and returning a profit. We really want to optimize instead of maximize sometimes, right? And then early in the breeding season, it's really important. First day of the meeting, and then yesterday, you know, several people touched on this, and we cannot stress how important it is to really front load our herd, right? In the herds of our clients, to make sure that they're having a lot of cows pregnant early, also calving early, and you know that those calves will perform better. And reproductive efficiency, right? If we do that, to achieve reproductive efficiency, there's really not one thing that will fix it. You know, yesterday we talked about the silver bullet. It just doesn't exist, right? So I like to think about reproductive efficiency as a sum of things, right? It's not the one thing that will fix it all. So it's really a combination of management, nutrition, and animal health. You know, having an increased selection pressure for fertility, and then take advantage of reproductive technologies. And as veterinarians, you know, the animal health, it's a no-brainer, right? Everybody associates the veterinarian with that, but there's really something we can do on management, helping with nutrition, as well as, you know, talking about selection pressure and guiding clients over reproductive technology. So there's a space for the veterinarian Each one of those things are important for reproductive efficiency. And when we think about reproductive technologies, there are several, right? Yesterday we talked about using EPDs and genomic testing, Estrus Synchronization and AI. We really hammer that down, right? We talk a lot about this. It's one of the goals of the Beef Reproduction Task Force is to increase the adoption of artificial insemination and Estrus Synchronization. We just had an amazing talk about embryo transfer and IVF, right? So there's a lot of tools available on the reproductive technology toolbox to help producers achieve reproductive efficiency. And again, we talk a lot about AI and fixed time AI, and because we know that those are probably the most powerful tools that we have there to make sure the cows become pregnant early, right? And then will calve early, right? So this is a very classical study that was shown already, I think, twice during the last 2 days, because it shows the power of synchronization to make sure they get more cows pregnant early, right? So versus a control system that only uses natural services, right? And on the specific study, Dr. Lamb's group, that he's going to speak right after me here, when cows were synchronized and exposed to synchronization and AI, got 44% cows calving within the first 20 days of the calving season versus only about 25% of those cows that were not synchronized and exposed to the natural service only. And on that study, that really translated into more pounds of calf to be weaned and to be sold on those operations that use Estrus synchronization, right? 38 pounds, which, if I'm not mistaken, at the time the economic analysis was made, it was almost like $50 more per cow exposed because of those increasing pounds of calf to be sold. Now, the power of reproductive technologies are real, right? We and hopefully as veterinarians, you all understand this. And it's well established, it's supported by research, and it has been field tested, right? So we know it works, right? We really know it works. But our producers, our clients really take advantage of it in the United States. And I want to point out a survey that the USDA, the National Animal Health Monitoring Systems, does these cow-calf studies every 10 years. And if you have never seen those, I really encourage you to go to the USDA website and read them. Like we have the first one in 1997, a second one that was performed in 2007, and then most recently, the 2017 survey came out, I think, last year. And it's a really insightful survey that has a lot of nice information that can help you understand how things are working in the United States, as well as where can we improve and where can we make sure that we're helping clients improve. So, a lot of interesting data out of that survey. For example, adoption of a breeding season in cow-calf operations, beef cow-calf operations in the United States. So in yellow is the percentage of operations, and in red, the percentage of beef cows that are under a different lengths of breeding season, right? So if we really think about a more tight breeding season, 190 days or less, there's about 45% of the operations and roughly the cows as well in the United States that are under a breeding season, right? So there's definitely room to grow, right? We would love to see that up towards 80-90% of the people that are producing beef in this country doing through a breeding season, right? Utilization of breeding soundness exam, right? By different numbers of different herd sizes, right? Overall, only 31% of the operations are doing a breeding soundness exam on their bulls on a regular, yearly basis, right? Very clearly, smaller producers with less than 50 head do not take advantage of this technology versus some of the larger producers, 200 plus head. The vast majority of them are definitely doing a BSc every year. So if you're a veterinarian, recent grad, that's job security perhaps. That's an opportunity to grow your business and hopefully help us increase the percentage of operations in the next over 10 years. They really take advantage of BSE and understand the importance of a breeding sounds exam, right? Always like to point out, some of those smaller producers, sometimes they have only one bull. And if they don't test that one bull, and for some reason that bull has a problem and is not producing semen that year, it's a really bad year for that breeding season, right? Pregnancy diagnosis, this year, first year, they actually broke it down, the way people are preg checking, so just regular rectal palpation, performing a blood test or performing ultrasounding. So it's really nice, broken down and the different technologies for pregnancy diagnosis. But again, overall, 31% of the operations, only 31% of the operations performing and breeding any sort of pregnancy diagnosis on a yearly basis. Really nice to see the larger operations, over 200 head, almost every single operation is doing a pregnancy diagnosis, right? And understands, clearly understands the importance of doing a pregnancy diagnosis. So, we're talking about AI and Estrus synchronization. So what about that? In yellow is percentage of AI, operations that are doing AI. In blue, percent of operations that are doing Estrus synchronization. And again, the larger the producer, the more likely they are to adopt some of these technologies, right? And if we look at overall, only about 11% of the operations in the country using AI, and 7.3% of them doing through Estrus synchronization, right? And again, we understand, right? We've talked so much about the importance and the power of those technologies to really achieve reproductive efficiency, increase profitability, and so on. So there's definitely room to grow. So where were we 10 years ago when the last survey was released? We definitely seen an increase, right? 7.6% in our 11. So, we're definitely growing, but there's for sure more room to grow, right? And I think that's important for veterinarians to understand, so that we can really push some of those technologies and push the industry forward, right? So how do we compare to some of the other countries, like Brazil, for example, which is the largest commercial herd in the world, and the second largest producer behind the US? 13.1% of the females, beef females now in Brazil, are exposed to AI. Still a lot of room to grow there as well, right? But it's definitely growing at a faster pace. So, over 200% growth in the last 16 years or so. And there's differences in production system and the way some of the producers compensate, and there's definitely an increased value of having AI calves that are sired to Bostaros type breeds like in Angus, into some of those Bosinicus cows that really help increase the value of those calves, which sometimes we might not see so clearly here. And I'll apologize for the figure in Portuguese, but just to highlight, this is, let's see if I can point our options. This is percentage of cows that are being AI with just estrus detection versus percentage of the cows that are being AI with estrus synchronization, right? And the total number of cows that are performing AI, so definitely growing in Brazil. And 86% of the cows, the beef cows now that are AI in Brazil, are done so by estrus synchronization, right? So definitely growing pretty fast compared to what we've seen in the United States. So, why is adoption of AI and timed AI in the US kind of low and slow? And that's a question it's a complicated answer. And I know people way before me that have been trying to understand and convince people on the benefits of some of those technologies, right? And I'm not going to try and answer this question, but I really think that one of the things that we can address to perhaps increase the speed of adoption and the proportion of people that are adopting these technologies is really getting more veterinarians involved in this process. Another real insightful thing that came out on the survey from the USDA, it was, is this table, which is a percentage of operations that consulted a veterinarian during the past year for the reasons listed below, right? So the number one reason here is disease diagnosis or treatment, which makes sense. It's no surprise there. So overall, 37% of the operations will consult a veterinarian when looking at disease diagnosis or treatment. Right? And the same thing, larger operations taking more advantage of the veterinarian services for that. Right? Disease prevention, number 2 right there, also makes sense, right? Nutrition comes on number 3 there, which is interesting, that a lot of people are relying on veterinarian information for nutrition, which is great. And then, where's the Repro, right? So as I started reading this, I was like, where's the Repro? And perhaps it's there, mixed on the different information on production and management practices that are other than health, right? But even if it's listed there, right, it was not important enough to be listed by itself, looking for reproductive advice and reproductive management, strategies and so on. And only 9%, right? And if it's listed there, only 9% of producers really looking for a veterinarian for reproductive advice, reproductive management advice, for example, which was really surprising. And again, I think might shed a light on the importance and the need that we have, that we need to have more veterinarians get involved into reproductive services. They're not just, performing a BSc every year. They're not just, dealing with some dystocias or, a C-section once in a while, but really coming in, talking about reproductive management and what are you doing? Let's use genomics. Let's use AI. Let's use, really showing, the lack of technologies that are out there and things that we can improve on that range, hopefully for that client. The other thing that was important that I thought was pretty interesting, consulting a veterinarian for production or financial analysis, such as standardized performance analysis, right? Which is, which we're really going to try to talk today. It's highlighting some of the things that we can show producers to hopefully, show performance and do that analysis and help them understand why some things are working and some things are not working, for example. So I think there's definitely a need and an opportunity for veterinarians to step in and do both of those things. So, if you think about, again, that equation of reproductive efficiency, management is the number one thing that's listed there, right? And data collection and management is super important. Like, we cannot manage anything if we're not really collecting data. Otherwise, we're just making guesses and we can't really inform decisions without data. So, clients and probably a lot of you on your own practices have different ways of collecting data or helping producers, hopefully helping producers collect the data. There are several farm management softwares available. Some are free, some are paid, right? There's things with apps now, which are really nice, that will connect to EID readers, which really makes it easy, and we're almost be able to eliminate paper because everybody loses paper, for example, and we put things on paper, then we don't put it on the computer, and then we forget about it, right? So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there and good technology that can help us collect the data and manage that data, hopefully in an accurate way. We use a lot of Microsoft Excel. Every computer nowadays have a Microsoft Excel, and it really gives a lot of flexibility to manage things and pick the data that you want to collect. And if you want to collect something else next year, it's easy to add. easy accessibly as well. So, but in reality, you know, a producer that collects data using pen and paper and does a good job of making sure it's organized and makes accessible whenever you need to look at that data, you know, that's all we need, right? Because we need to make sure that however you do it, that those records are accurate, right? Because otherwise, it just really doesn't help us at all. So I want to just throw out some things there that I think are important for clients to be collecting, and hopefully you helping them, those clients, to collect this data, right? So some of them might be, you know, females, cows, heifers, right? Date of birth, birth weight, weaning weight, for example, right? Of those females, so you can have those records and perhaps rank our cattle based on some of those characteristics. You know, calving dates. Calving data is really important. So when did that cow calve? You know, this last year, so we can do days postpartum, for example, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. What's the birth weight of those calves? And what's the weaning weight of the calves out of those cows, right? Then again, we can, you know, go back and rank our cows based on, you know, weaning weight, and we can really see which cows are doing the best job in our herd. Body weight and body condition score, you know, I always tell people that, like, not everybody can do body weight, right? Not everybody has a scale. Sometimes, you know, here in Virginia, a lot of smaller producers do not have a scale, but everybody can do a body condition score, right? Which, you know, just takes some training, but it really doesn't need any equipment to do a body condition score. So I always tell people, you know, at least 3 times a year, you do a calving, a breeding, and then a preg check, for example, and we can really have a good idea where that cow or heifer is. You know, was she gaining weight? Was she losing weight? Was she maintaining weight as well, which can really help us understand sometimes why reproductive failure might happen, for example. Health records are really important. Dr. Randall Spare talked about temperament, and we're going to touch a little bit on that too. Those are important things to keep in mind, not only for you know, safety reasons, but also for production reasons. Breeding information, right? If you're doing natural service, you know, make sure that you're collecting bull ID, which bull is exposed to which cows, which cow groups, making sure that we're doing a BSE and recording the results of those BSE exams, all the bulls in the operation, collecting body weight, body condition score, as well as bull to cow ratio on each group of cows that that the producer might have. Because again, if we have a problem, if we have a group of cows that really did poorly during the breeding season, hopefully we can go back and say, well, you know, this bull didn't pass the BSE, and we told you to you know, that he didn't, for example, or you know, he was losing body weight before the breeding season, and so on, or you have too many cows with a bull that's immature, right? And if we don't have that kind of information, we can't really tease out some of the reasons why things fail, for example, or you know, some of the reasons why things are really working out, so that we can hopefully continue to do those management practices. If we're doing AI, you know, AI sire for each cow, each sire that we use for each cow, AI technician, for example, is really important. Again, body condition score at the time of AI, Estrus response, the date that you did all that. And if you're doing Estrus synchronization, which protocol are you using each client? The sire, AI technician, did that cow or heifer showed Estrus before AI during that protocol? Okay, because we know that that's going to affect how the probability of that cow or heifer to become pregnant. And then, you know, pregnancy diagnosis, right? When we did it, hopefully we can do fetal ages, so we can, especially if we're doing AI and fixed time AI, we can sort out which pregnancies are AI versus which pregnancies are only natural service, and we can have a better understanding of how the system is working. I just plug that in there. We work with the Virginia Department of Corrections, which is a prison system here in the state of Virginia, and they're a client of the vet school. And we provide veterinary services as well as reproductive services to all of the herds that are under the Virginia Department of Corrections. And, you know, we have a kind of a basic spreadsheet for each herd that we visit, and then we have a master spreadsheet where we combine all the data. And sometimes the spreadsheets can become quite wide with several columns, but I just put this out here. This is kind of the minimum information that we collect on each herd. Okay, so each column is a data point, right? Is a data that we information that we want to collect, and then each line is an animal. And then what we do is each tab underneath Excel, it's a location, and then we can combine all this, and then also use by year, for example. Last year we can look at things compared to this year, and so on. But again, Excel makes it really easy to add another information. For example, if next year you want to start collecting, another data point, for example, did a cow lose a cedar or not? Let's look at pregnancy loss, for example. So between the time we do the first preg check and the last preg check, if we're doing two pregnancy diagnoses, for example, it really allows us to play with the data with a little bit more freedom. So big fan of Excel. And if you're not comfortable with Excel, it sounds trivial, but a lot of YouTube videos that can really help you understand things and learn how to manage data on Excel. And once you start real learning, it's not very complicated. That's the truth, and it's a really powerful software. So some people touched on this yesterday, and I think it's a little bit important. So what is days postpartum, right? We talked about that. But it really is the interval in days between calving and breeding, right? And I think defining that is important, because if I'm using days postpartum up to the time of breeding, which could be the first day of the breeding season if we're doing natural service, for example, or the day of AI, if you're doing AI or fixed time AI, I'd be different from someone that's doing fixed time AI and does days postpartum up to the day of the beginning of the protocol, for example, right? And some of the protocols are long, 10 days, for example. Some protocols are getting even longer now. So there could be quite a difference, right? So we want to make sure that however you're doing this, you're being consistent. So we do days postpartum between first day of calving all the way to the day of breeding, for example, or the first day of the start of the breeding season. Conception rate is really the number of pregnancies by inseminations, right, or breedings. So for example, if you're doing heat detection and we only detected 80% of your cows in heat, you're going to do a conception rate based on that 80%, right? So you don't really do overall the herd, because that's pregnancy rate, right? So pregnancy rate is the number of pregnancy by the total number of cows that are eligible for breeding. So it's a little bit different. So however you're presenting that to your clients, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a consistent way so that there's no confusion, right? And a lot of times, especially for clients that are using fixed time AI, conception rate and pregnancy rate are really the same thing, because you're synchronizing all the cows, so they're all exposed to AI. So conception rate and pregnancy rate are really the same thing. But I think it's important so that we understand this, so that when we're looking at data and we're presenting data, we really talk about the same thing. So just to illustrate some things that I think are important. Let's imagine a client that has 100 beef cows, beef females. Those are 80 cows and 20 heifers. Has a 70-day breeding season. He times the AI, all the females. So they synchronize in AI, all females list once. And then those females are exposed to natural service bulls for that the reminder of the 70-day breeding season. And we do pregnancy diagnosis twice during the season. 30 days post AI, so we can look at AI pregnancy rates with confidence, and then 30 days after the end of the breeding season or when the bulls are removed. Okay, so we're going to do that. Look at some key performance indicators, right? So some of the things that I would show that client A at the end of the breeding season, so that we can look at some of the results and things that we can improve, right? So for example, we can look at time-day pregnancy rates. So If we went and preg check 30 days after AI, there's 50 females pregnant. That's 50 out of 100. That's 50%, right? Natural service pregnancy rates. For example, if we got 43 females pregnant out of the remaining 50 cows that were not pregnant by AI, we got an 86% pregnancy rate for a total pregnancy rate, which combined timed AI and natural service of 93%, right? Now, one thing that we started doing with the Virginia Department of Corrections, we always compare them to their past year, which I think is really nice. And then the more you do this, for example, have a client that's a little bit older that we've been going to that farm for a longer period of time, you can really do an average of all the past years, which can give you a pretty good idea, are we doing better? Are we improving or maintaining, or are we going down? Are we doing anything wrong and really hurting our results? As well as clients, other clients on their region, right? So this is something we're trying to do here in Virginia, create those benchmarks, right? So the prison, they have facilities all over the state, so we can use them to inform other producers around them. For example, producer had a really bad year, low pregnancy rates. It's like, well, on the prison herd that we have closest to you, for example, we also had a problem because it was too wet or it's too dry or whatever is the reason, right? But I think it's really nice to have benchmark to compare to, either them, their own data, or clients around them, so that we can really see, are we doing better or not? There's room to improvement. There always ask my students this, there's several things that will affect pregnancy rate to timed AI, right? But there's two main things that are really important. And when we get calls and somebody has had a problem and have poor pregnancy rates, and the two things that I'll ask for is, one, body condition score. What was the body condition score of the group of cows, and how was the days postpartum, right? So really nice study of Dr. Stevenson in Kansas. Looked at several different breeding records from different research trials before, combined them. And again, the two main factors that affect the pregnancy rate to timed AI were days postpartum and body condition score, right? So in both multiparous and primiparous cows in that study, as you decrease days postpartum and decrease body condition score, pregnancy rates really suffer, right? So when we're looking at clients' data, some of the really important key performance indicators that we always show producers and clients is pregnancy rate by body condition score, right? So for example, at the time of AI, so if a cow that had a body condition score, out of all the cows that had body condition score 3, and really the lowest pregnancy rates compared to some of the cows that had body condition score a little bit higher and adequate as well. Sometimes you get cows too fat and they also suffer, problems with fertility, right? And then days postpartum as well, right? So we can create these kinds of figures to show them, what's going on. And they can, again, help us understand why things are working or understand why things are really going bad, right? Again, another really important thing that we do, and we like to show clients, is not only pregnancy rate by category and other things, but when are those cows are getting pregnant, right? To do this with accuracy, you need to make sure when preg checking, you'll be able to fetal age those pregnancies, so that we can be a little bit more accurate. But we like to break it down when those cows become pregnant in the breeding season, right? So the first 10 days, which is usually timed AI pregnancy rates, follow for that first cycle with the bull, for example, right? And we do that on a pregnancy rate per period plus a cumulative pregnancy rate, so that which is shown here in orange, right? So we can show pregnancy for each of those periods, right? As well as the cumulatives, just to make sure that the pregnancy rate is going up, right? Also help us understand how our bulls are doing, right? Did the bulls struggle to get cows pregnant early on or not? Are they really doing their job? It's a good way of looking at this. A lot of times we call it like first bull, second bull, third bull pregnancy, right? So we should really follow the cycle, approximately the estrus cycle of those cows during the breeding season. Estrus expression, we had some talks about this early on, is really important. A really nice paper out of Dr. George Perry group, look at meta-analysis, look at several research studies that were done previously, and they looked at the effect of estrus. So if the cow showed estrus before time they died, the effect that they had on pregnancy rate. And in average, they saw that if the cow shows estrus during the protocol, they had a 27% increase in pregnancy rates, right? So we know estrus expression is really important. So we always like to show pregnancy by estrus response, right? And then to be able to do this, we're going to make sure that we are collecting estrus, right? Either with Astrotech patches or making sure that we're putting tail chalk on the cow so that we can detect them in estrus, right, accurately. Because then we can also really take a look at, is the synchronization protocol working, for example. The day of AI, there's very little cows in estrus, did something went on? Did we change a product, for example? Did we made a mistake and gave prostaglandin instead of GnRH, for example? Dr. Lamb will talk about this, some of those problems after my talk. So it's really important to take a look at those things. So again, we can diagnose problems, right? Animal category, right? Primitive cows versus multiparous cows, as well as mature cows versus heifers. It's very basic things that we can do easily with data from producers and show them, how they're doing. Are we doing a better job with heifers or not? There are primitive cows really suffering, our first calf heifers, right? Are they really suffering? Do we need to perhaps supplement them better so that we can bump up those pregnancy rates? Other things, AI technician, sire, compare if you're using multiple sires, especially larger clients, can we look at some differences in sire? Difficult to do that with a lot of statistical power, but that's not even the goal, but it's just to look at things, right? Just to look at data and be able to make some decisions based on that. In our part of the world, there's a lot of fall versus spring breeding seasons. People sometimes have both. So I always like to compare them. We're doing better in fall versus spring. Groups within the herds, we have multiple groups, multiple locations. It's always nice to compare to make sure everything is working, how they're doing, as well as different time day protocols, which is usually not the case. But if somebody wants to do a change, wants to use a new protocol, trying to compare them within the same year is always nice. And then reproductive track scores, which is really the way I think about reproductive track score is really the BSC for the heifers, right? It's the breeding soundness exam of a heifer. And a really nice data out of Dr. Pedersen's group in Missouri. They have access to the Show Me Select Heifers heifer development program, access to a lot of heifers, and reproductive track score, which they'll do every year, as well as pelvic measurements. So, if you're not familiar with it, it's a 1 to 5 scale based on morphological differences between the uterus and the ovary and the presence. Really help us determine if the heifer is cycling or not. Reproductive track scores from 1 to 5. We know the heifers that have a 4 or 5 will do better, right? They just get higher pregnancy rates. So we can do that as well. So percentage of heifers that became pregnant, percentage of heifers that have a specific reproductive track score by the beginning of the breeding season, as well as the pregnancy rate of those heifers. And then the last thing that I'll show is temperament. I think it's important. We try to overlook sometimes. We just think as a safety problem, but it is also a production problem, right? So just to illustrate this, it's a study that we did here in Virginia. We looked at temperament of heifers, and the way we measure that, we do a shoot score, which is a 1 to 4, 1 to 5, score. So a heifer that just walks in and she's calm, she just sits on the chute, she's a 1. The heifer that runs into the chute, struggles and is vocalizing all the time, she's a 4, right? And she's more excited. We do exit velocity, which is a little bit more difficult to do. than with the producer, because we need a specific equipment to do that. But everybody can do that shoot score, right? So this is distribution of heifers that have a calm or more excitable temperament. So anything that's a 3 or above, we call it excitable. Anything less than 3, we call it a calm heifer. So overall, about 70% of our heifers were calm on this study, and about 30% of them excitable. But when we look at pregnancy rates to time the eye, you really saw a huge difference between those two categories of heifers, right? So that's one more data point that we can collect to help understand, are we doing a good job how we work our cattle or not? Are we selecting for cattle that have a better temperament? And it can also affect fertility. And the same thing works for cows, not only heifers, right? There's definitely a lot of studies that showing that when the heifer or the cow is more aggressive, they have reduced productivity as well. So, and same thing, we can generate that, right? So in summary, it's really, veterinarians are key for reproductive success, and we tend to overlook that. And I think a lot of clients, unfortunately, don't understand that, by either, we as veterinarians are not doing a good job of offering that service and being that point of contact, the point of information for a lot of reproductive technologies and management, or the clients are really not allowing us to step in and take care and provide that information, right? So, really challenge you to push your clients for better data collection, and then hopefully allowing you to analyze and really look at just some of those key performance indicators that are really important on any cow-calf operation, so that we can really use that data to make decisions, make changes, and hopefully you can help your producers do better, right? And with that, I think we're probably over time, so I'll move it on to Lee.